I would like to tell you the story of two women whose actions over the last 24 hours have impacted the lives of 340 million Americans, but in entirely different ways. One woman is doing her ethical duty to hold the line for democracy and enforce the rule of law. The other is a craven politician who frames herself as a good, moderate Republican, who doesn't like the things that the Trump regime is doing and yet votes in line with their awful fascist agenda every single time. This is a story of how one woman is consistently doing the right thing by the American people, while the other has sold all of us out in an attempt to create some political power and leverage for herself in her home state of Alaska. So we knew that this big, nasty, bloated budget bill was coming up for a vote in the Senate, right? And there's been a lot of scrambling. There were a number of senators who were expressing severe concern because this budget plan is incredibly, incredibly unpopular. Americans oppose it 2-1. And when you explain to Americans what the details of the bill actually are, the opposition goes through the roof. Even for Republicans who initially approve of the bill, when someone sits them down and explains what's actually in it, how it's going to close hospitals all across this country, how it's going to balloon the debt, how it's going to take healthcare away from 11 million Americans, suddenly the approval rating, even amongst that group, drops to 18%. This bill is deeply, deeply, deeply unpopular because, one, it's not even a budget bill. It's a how do we implement Project 2025 as quick as we can kind of a bill. It's not about the budget at all. It's how do we give a giant tax break to billionaires for the next decade, balloon the national debt, and gut the programs that American people depend on. Oh, and give billions and billions and billions of dollars to ICE so that they can terrorize more communities across this country. This bill is a bad scene for everybody except a small group of billionaires up here. And then like Core Civics and Geo Group and the dudes who run these for-profit businesses that are running ICE detention facilities and the unmarked vans that drive through and snatch immigrants off the streets. That's who this bill benefits, right? It hurts all of us, everybody else in America. This bill is incredibly damaging. And senators have been trying to sneak all kinds of hinky shit into this bill, right? There's all kinds of legislation that they know that they cannot bring forward and pass in the light of day because it's so incredibly unpopular with their constituents. It will have tremendous negative political consequences for them, but they want to go ahead and push through their repressive, oppressive policies. And so what we're seeing is that they tried to add a bunch of things to this budget bill, and the Senate parliamentarian said, no, you can't do things like sell off federal land in 11 states. You can't do things like make changes to the farm bill. You can't do things like change environmental law in a budget reconciliation bill. So she slashed more than a dozen provisions out of this bill, even though it's deeply unpopular, even though she's getting threats, even though there are Republicans now calling for her resignation. She's like, I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do my job and make sure that what the senators are doing adheres to the rules that they are required to stick to. I am not going to let them violate the rules. I'm not going to let them do things. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do my job, even though Republicans in Congress are abdicating their responsibility. They are not doing their jobs. The Senate parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, has said, I will still do mine. So she slashed a whole lot of terrible things out of this bill. It doesn't mean that the bill is not devastating as is right now. There are still innumerable terrible things. In fact, the current version of the bill that the senators are trying to push through makes even more cuts to Medicaid and more cuts to SNAP than the House bill. It's now close to $1 trillion of cuts that senators want to make to Medicaid, right? It's devastating. Almost 12 million people will lose their health care. That's not being done to reduce the national debt. Nope, nope, no, nope. This bill will balloon the debt, trillions of dollars. Everything that they're doing in this bill is all to give massive tax breaks to the billionaires who are already obscenely rich and already refuse to pay their fair share of taxes. So late yesterday, the senators were having this marathon negotiation, right? Like originally Josh Hawley was against the bill. He ended up voting for it, even though he said, like, I don't think this is a good idea. This is a vote to further advance the bill, right? So it has to go back to the House and then there'll be a final version that comes back to the Senate. Hawley knows this is politically very bad for him. A lot of other Republican senators know it's very bad for them because you've been letting them know. You've been calling them and you need to keep calling them and say, if you vote for this bill, we're going to vote you out, right? Both in the House and the Senate. If you vote for this bill, we're voting you out. So late in the day yesterday, Republicans did not have the votes to get this big, nasty, bloated budget bill passed. and there was some last-minute scrambling behind closed doors. And two of the last holdouts, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, ended up flipping and voting yes. The final vote was 51-49. Two Republicans joined with the Democrats in voting no for the budget bill. They are Tom Tillis of North Carolina and Rand Paul of Kentucky. Tom Tillis knew that this was a really bad thing for his state. He knew that it was a bad thing for him politically, and so he refused to fall in line with the Trump regime. Now, we know that Rand Paul, who's like, libertarian, he would vote against something that would balloon the debt as far as it did, right? So really, we could argue about whether Rand Paul actually cares about stopping all of the nasty shit in that bill. He just didn't want to balloon the deficit. Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, they present themselves as like moderate Republicans who are always pearl clutching about the terrible things that Republicans want to do and just say, this makes me sad. I don't think this is a great thing. But then they fall in line and they vote for it anyway, right? They have objections to Trump's horrible, horrible cabinet nominations, election deniers, outright Yahtzees, fascists. But in the end, they vote to approve those nominees, right? Lisa Murkowski, a couple months ago, I covered this. She had some town hall with her constituents and she was like, we're all scared. Republicans are all really scared. He's threatening to primary us if we stand up against him. And, we're really scared. So don't be mad if we vote in line with Trump's agenda. Like, bitch, you think the American people aren't scared? You think that we're not, you think that our neighbors who are being snatched off the streets by ICE are not scared? You think that mothers with disabled children who are losing their Medicaid coverage are not scared? You think our veterans who are being fired from the federal workforce are not scared? You think that we are not scared. Why do you get to be scared and be a absolutely chicken shit coward and vote in line with Trump's agenda? We're the only ones who are expected to have courage. You're a U.S. senator, right? With Lisa Murkowski, every time it's the pearl clutching, it's the, this hurts my heart and I don't want to have to go along with it, you guys. And there was some speculation back when Lisa did her town hall and she was like, we're really scared. Republican officials, we're really, really scared. So we have to do what Trump wants because he's threatening us. Folks were saying, what's he threatening you with? Like, is he going to, assassinate you? Is he threatening your family members? No, he's threatening them with primaries, y'all. They don't want to lose their jobs. He is threatening them with a primary. In fact, we saw when Senator Tillis said he was going to vote against the budget bill, that Trump said, I'm going to primary you. And you know what he ended up doing? He said, fine, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and vote against this bill because it's bad for this country. It's bad for my constituents in North Carolina. And then Trump said again, fine, I'm going to primary you. And he said, you know what? Fuck it, I'm retiring. And Tillis was like, a Democrat's probably going to win my seat anyway. Good luck running a MAGA Republican against a Democrat in the Senate seat that I am going to vacate. We just saw a man who was willing to lose his job rather than push through this budget bill. But Lisa Murkowski, who acts like everything is devastating and it's really bad, and I'm not a MAGA. I don't want to have to support. I'm a moderate Republican. I don't want to have to support these things. But then I go ahead and vote along with it every single time. I go ahead and enable fascism every single time. What we saw yesterday was a 51-49 vote. Lisa's vote mattered. She was a holdout until the very end. And then do you know what happened? This is me posting on Blue Sky in the middle of the night because I was getting up to see what had happened with the bill. The quote here from Huffington Post is, Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, also voted to advance the bill after holding the chamber in suspense for an hour about how she intended to vote. She did so after intense cajoling from Vance and several GOP leaders on the Senate floor. Of course, my late night take was that she folds every time, because she does. There's no such thing as a moderate Republican. There are only gutless collaborators with fascism. This bill advanced because of a 51-49 vote. And this is where the stories of these two women converge. Do you know why Lisa folded? Because they promised her that the cuts they were going to make to Medicaid, they would not apply to her state of Alaska. They made a special carve-out just for her state. So she was perfectly willing to betray all of the rest of the American people in order to gain political capital in her state of Alaska. She knew if these cuts went through, Alaskans would be incredibly pissed at her. So she wanted to protect her own seat in the Senate. But guess what, y'all? Just a couple of hours ago, the Senate parliamentarian said, no, Lisa Murkowski is not going to get her way. You can't make these cuts to the other states and then exempt Alaska. So now what, Lisa? I know you're not going to grow a spine, but it's back to the drawing board.